The Triumph TR7 and TR8, the two final cars of the legendary Triumph TR series, a series of cars that defined the British sports car in the 20th century. The TR7 was a monumental change for Triumph, especially the TR line, as the tagline suggested, the shape of things to come, looking like nothing else on the road on its launch in 1975. But the TR7 would become a victim of the unfolding BL disaster that would eventually kill the Triumph sports car. 17-week strikes at its plant in Speke, 3,000 uncommunicated engineering changes during production, and a lack of testing would leave the TR7 to be called the worst failure of British Leyland. This is how the TR7 was mortally wounded in one of the costliest disasters the British car industry has ever seen, from conception to sale and production, and how it defied the odds to become the best-selling Triumph TR sports car. Hello everybody and welcome to this video on the Triumph TR7 and analysing why it failed so badly. If you're not subscribed already, please make sure to do so. It really does help me out and you get to see more of this. More history videos, more cars and conversions uncovered, and more projects like my Rover SD175 and my Range Rover. This video is about the Triumph TR7 and how it was sabotaged every single step of the way. Drop a comment below what's your opinions on this and let me know any of your Triumph or Triumph TR7 memories. Make sure to share the video if you want other people to see it and want to see their opinions on this incredible story. But without further delay, let's get into this video on the Triumph TR7. Triumph in 1968, as with most British car companies, would find itself part of the massive British Leyland Corporation after a series of mergers. This though presented Triumph with a problem, as well as the rest of BL's marques: competition. Not just competition from the outside, but within. For Triumph, a brand that was sadly struggling to get a look in at the boardroom table, this was a disaster. The big seller, the Herald, was nearing the end of its model life by this point. The Spitfire competed with the MG Midget. The 2000 Saloon competed with the best-selling Rover P6. But there was one car that was simply unmatched: the Triumph TR series. The TR6, developed by Triumph during the standard Triumph years, was a success, not just in its native land but abroad as well, mainly in the lucrative US market. The TR6 wasn't just a sales success, it was a production success as well. Assembled in Coventry, Triumph's heartland, the Canley plant was churning out more and more cars, more efficiently, with a 14% production increase from 1967 to 1968. Canley would produce 139,000 cars that year. Triumph cars were a big hit in the US. 19,000 would be exported that same year, making the Triumph TR series a household name. Triumph was, in 1970, creating their new sports car to replace the TR6, a follow-up to one of their greatest hits. The Triumph Bullet would emerge as an anonymous but forward-thinking design. MG's proposal, the mysterious mid-engined AD021, would lose to Triumph after Speke's research into the American market. The dealers and the car-buying public in the US wanted a conventional car, which was exactly what the Triumph Bullet was. In 1971, the Bullet was given the go-ahead, and BL's board would give the green light. But this is when it all started to go wrong. Donald Stokes, BL's chairman, would set a hard deadline for its introduction in 1975, a massive undertaking for a completely new design for the US sports car. Speke would be put in charge of development. The Triumph TR7 would then get another significant blow during this important phase: product planning. Even though the car was meant to be a replacement for the aging MGB, would price it higher to eliminate the two competing with each other and to allow the MGB to remain on sale, moving the car away from the market it was initially conceived for. The TR7 would be a conventional affair, borrowing most of its components from other British Leyland cars, its mass-market stablemates. The engine was a development of the Slant 4 used in the Dolomite, moving away from the traditional Triumph 6. The TR7 also lost the independent rear suspension of the TR6 in favour of a live rear axle. Driving dynamics-wise, it was comparable with its competition, but compared with its predecessor, it didn't quite cut it. By 1972, the car was coming together on the tight deadline. Harris Mann would later be brought in to give the car the character it needed, resulting in its iconic wedge design. The design though would be watered down so it could share the components needed with other cars. Thanks to the US regulations threatening convertibles at the time, the full drop-top bullet was dropped in favour of the TR7 Coupe, moving the car even further away from its intended market. During its earliest stages, the TR7 had moved completely away from its intended market. This would come to haunt the TR7 on its introduction. Usually, even with BL cars, the final stages of honing and testing would occur. This includes production, and of course the final vehicle itself. This stage was dropped by BL in favour of getting the car launched on time. The TR7 would then move on to its final stage in 1974. The vehicle was ready for production, but without the critical testing and honing stages needed for maximum efficiency in production, and of course, the integrity of the end product. This would haunt the car in production and on the road, meaning changes needed to be made, resulting in quality issues initially, and then unmanaged changes on the production line, destroying the integrity of the car further. Sadly for the TR7, even before it got to the public, it would have its work cut out for it. The car, originally seen as a replacement for the MGB for the US market and conceived as such, would see its original plans changed, pitching the car above what it was initially intended to replace. This caught the US dealers off guard through lack of communication. Their original requirements weren't taken on board. They simply didn't know where to pitch this vehicle, resulting in a marketing nightmare. The development was rushed in favour of it being introduced in the mid-70s, meaning the car's driving dynamics weren't up to scratch, considering its lineage. The TR7 found itself in an awkward middle ground. It wasn't quite as complex or as dynamic as the TR6, but it wasn't as cheap and predictable as the MGB in terms of styling and handling. The car had moved away from its original proposal, moving it to a completely different category. All the original building blocks for success had been discarded. The car wasn't what it was originally pitched to be for the American market. It hadn't been tested as thoroughly as it should have been, thanks to BL's management. To justify the higher price, the interior was given an upgrade, made more luxurious, but the US base models wouldn't come with a radio as standard. The TR7 had become a bit of a misfit, morphing time and time again with lack of direction. On launch, the Harris Mann-styled TR7 echoed cars like the Austin Xander. It was a hit with some of the press. The rest, though, didn't quite know what to make of it. It was a 1980s car for 1975. It was the shape of things to come, years ahead of its time with its incredible wedge styling, incorporating the US crash regulation bumpers into the body of the car in a similar fashion to Fiat's X19. The car was launched initially in the US only. It was of course conceived for that market. Even though it had strayed so far from its initial proposal, it could have gained a footing and become a hit. But there was another problem. Its performance was degraded thanks to the US emissions equipment. The US wouldn't see any of the higher performance engines until much later on. The 4-cylinder engine on the original cars would be restricted to economy car levels of performance, which didn't quite fit a premium British sports car. The TR7 became all show and no go. The TR7, even as a direct replacement for the TR6, wasn't up to it either. 90 brake horsepower on the US carb models compared to the 105 on the TR6's standard configuration in the US, with the US injection version of the TR6 at 150 brake horsepower. It also lacked the lucrative droppable roof. Sadly, the TR7 would be punished again in production. The newly built Speke No. 2 was built by BL to produce 100,000 cars per year, all under one roof. A £10 million investment in 1969, which is around £200 million today. With the lack of honing and testing, this meant the car would have to go through changes during production, but that wasn't the only thing facing the workers at Speke. Management at Speke had been gradually replaced by managers poached from Ford. The cultures between the two completely different companies didn't mesh well. Workers and management had an us and them mentality. Stoppages, strikes and industrial unrest would follow. The TR7 in the US would gain a reputation for poor build quality. It would then become a sales flop in the lucrative US market. BL's board were not pleased. Market research after the launch would indicate only 6% of buyers would purchase another BL sports car. Speke became a haven for finger pointing at the TR7's expense. Luckily though, the car would have a second chance. It would be launched in the UK and Europe in 1976. This second chance though would be a backdrop for some of the most incredible foibles in BL legend. Thanks to the lack of computerized ordering systems and stock management, such as Telext with Ford, the Speke plant would use a telephone ordering system. This resulted in 5,000 left wings being ordered and no right wings, meaning cars sat unfinished, workers went on strike, the workforce's buy-in and pride in what they were doing went with it. The management relationship stalled. The cars would go through numerous engineering changes during its production, resulting in even more strife. The margin for error was massive. If the operator heard you wrong, you could end up with completely wrong components, or perhaps none being delivered at all. This would result in car production being stopped, and in some cases, workers being sent home without pay. And in already challenging economic times, this would mean that workers would be sent home short. And of course, the finger would be pointed straight where the responsibility lies, with management. Change wasn't effectively managed on the shop floor, resulting in bodges and build quality issues. The Speke No. 2 plant was neglected as well, thanks to its poor design. The roof would leak, and thanks to the absenteeism with maintenance and general lack of effective reporting, car bodies would be stored inside, with the roof leaking directly onto unfinished bodies. Finally, 4 years too late, the Roadster would be offered. The original plan had been implemented 4 years too late. The Speke plant, after one of the largest stoppages it had ever faced, the lowest productivity of all BL plants, would be axed after a 13-week strike. The situation at Speke wasn't as simple as many have made it out to be. As with all of BL's blunders, it is an incredibly complex situation. A lack of process, procedure, weak management, a car that had been rushed to production, ineffectively managed change, and lack of worker buy-in and relations would create the perfect storm. The TR7 would be doomed in the shadow of Speke. The car simply could not catch a break. Every single step of the way, the TR7 would face a setback. But that didn't stop the TR7 becoming the best selling of the TR series. It wouldn't stop it becoming a motorsport icon. It wouldn't stop it becoming a legend. The TR7, including all models, and the TR8 would sell 115,000 units. Cars like XJO 414V and TUD 783T would compete in rally championships, such as the Manx International Trophy. The cars would become rally icons, but BL was falling apart. The TR7 and TR8 would cease production in 1981 after moving from Speke to Canley, and then finally Solihull, where the final 8,056 cars were made. The TR7 and its related models defied the odds. From conception to production and sale, the cars did not get a break. It was an afterthought which plagued the Triumph name through the BL years, until its discontinuation with the Triumph Acclaim. It had been neglected, cast aside with a lack of direction, something that plagued all BL models to a certain extent, but Triumph had it the worst. They had the winners, but ultimately turned out to be the losers, a case study for what not to do. If only BL management at the time cared as much for the Triumph TR7 and the brand as much as the owners and historians do now, then maybe it could have been different. But sadly, the end of Triumph was not a bang like the other marques. It simply faded fully into the background, with a rebadged Honda ending production in 1984. BMW now owns the Triumph name. And with that, it's the end of the video. As always, let me know your opinion below. Is there anything that could have been done differently in your opinion? Make sure to like the video if you liked it and subscribe if you want to see more of this. But as always, thank you for watching, keep watching, and remember to subscribe if you want to see more of this, and I'll see you in the next one.